All right, gonna call to order the meeting of March 21st. Jake, you have the roll call.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 21st meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Anyone have any corrections or? I would just ask you to change Bill Graff has not been the District 24 supervisor for a long, long time. He's listed in the list of people who are there. So he's a Monona resident though.
Okay.
It's the only thing I had. So no one else has anything. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Any appearances? No. Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. We distributed that vision and statement of purpose last time. Well, we were going to, did anybody have any more comments about that? I saw, I don't know, Andy, did you happen to make any, people made some comments last time, but I think it was more questioning if we should add something about the house
Yeah,
into it.
I didn't think there was anything. I mean, certainly we could add something, but I didn't hear any conclusive proposal.
Okay. So does anybody have anything else to add to that? Okay, do we need a vote to approve that, I think? Is there a motion?
I'll move through. Second.
Okay, any other further comments or anything? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item is discussion and action on the 3 concept park plans, and I was. And I think what we had hoped to do is have Dan, and I assume Jake passed this on to you, present each of the options pretty much as they would be presenting them at a public meeting next month, and then we can talk about it. I know you've added some things based on the discussion this time or whatever, so you want to go ahead and do that, and then we can.
Before we jump into it, we've got the draft PowerPoint for the public information meeting. Before we get into it, we do have the buildings, the 3 options of the buildings. How deep should we go into the discussion?
Andy and I talked about that, and we were thinking maybe we should go really deep at a meeting in May. I don't, because we just haven't, we need to spend time on it, and I don't think we have enough time to do that before then. Andy, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I would agree. Since our April, if anyone's asking why we're waiting or skipping April, is because that will be our public information session. And then in addition, we'll probably have a quick meeting in April too about the survey and finalize that. So we were just thinking having one meeting just solely dedicated, Quinn Evans can do their presentation. We can kind of do a deeper dive into the kind of program and kind of thoughts behind variety of building options.
So the slides that are in the PowerPoint are the same boards that were on the Miro board.
Sure.
And so it has the footprints. And then there's president pictures over to one side. We can kind of flip that where the footprints would be small, but then the pictures would be bigger. So that we can say this is kind of the flavor of these that this could take on. Where the house had pictures of the inside of the house, and meeting rooms, so people meeting. Then the other 2 structures, the shelter and the like a small event center, have those types of buildings as pictures. So,
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think,
Yeah, I think one of our hopes was based on the last survey, we could, when we create this new survey, we'd have more detailed in-depth questions as to kind of programming for a facility. So that then we'd have at least some taste of what those results would be by the May, if not have the full survey. And then we can kind of include that as a part of the conversation. So I think having these ideas in people's minds, I think would be fine and, worthwhile. And we can kind of think about how do we ask those questions in a survey. But I think that was generally our.
yeah, I don't think we need to get super specific about the house right now. And then that would be mainly the issue that we, in terms of what's going to happen there, because the small shelter and the big shelter, we have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
I also think we can mix and match the buildings and the
Yeah, you definitely.
for the signs for the property. So once we get an idea of what people want to do there, I don't think it really matters, does it, which structure goes on which,
Yeah, it's all flexible.
yeah, so it might be a parking difference.
I do have a question, though, as it relates to holding off on the whole facility discussion, and that is, I'm assuming that in the presentation that you would go maybe through the secondary sheet, which is to say the sort of opportunities and challenges with each of the facilities.
We have, the way that it's set
Or
up
what did
now
I
is like, Wes talked about themes, so we looked at, bulleted points of each concept,
right?
what they contain, so we didn't dive into opportunities or constraints.
Well, no, but there's a second sheet. I mean, I'm sorry that I didn't bring my entire packet with me, but there's a second sheet on every single one of the. After you get through this, and you get into the facilities, there's a second sheet where you've listed sort of pros and cons or opportunities and I would want to make sure that those are articulated well, if that's what we're going to use for the
I think I know what you're
Public
talking about, if they're on the building boards, right?
building board.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, when Alexa put those together, she put like dollar signs to say that this improvement would be more than this improvement, and then pros and cons to those things.
Right. Yeah, I guess.
And I think Dan took it, I think you took it out of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, so from what I understood, if I misinterpreted that, we pulled those slides out completely to save that for a later discussion. Because there's not gonna be time to.
If we are gonna get into the discussion about the structures, I think we're gonna have to put a public thing for another month. I don't see that we have any choice. And we're gonna have another public meeting, aren't we?
Yeah,
At some point that we
phase,
could incorporate the property structure.
The way it's
section.
set up in the presentation right now, it will be a discussion on keeping the house a larger multi-purpose structure and moving to a smaller, more typical park shelter building. And then the actual programming and details of that are things that will still be evolved as the concepts and master plan is refined further once we get through this meeting and then.
So the
Maybe.
boards wouldn't be part of it at all. I mean, the boards that you were just
Yeah.
referring to.
That's what it sounds like, and that's what I was asking before, if we should just include the images of the building.
I don't think it's a bad idea today to do that, but
Yeah. Yeah, and because, and I can understand that we can get bogged down with the discussion of just the house itself, because there's multiple versions of the house.
right.
And so at this public information meeting and this survey, it's more based on what each of these three concepts offer. House, no house, shelter, whatever, and then get the feedback from the community. And then dive into what, if the house is the favored, here's multiple options for the house. That's a whole nother discussion.
I think getting input on what functions community is looking for at this point is a key piece of information, because that we could deliver that in multiple ways.
Right.
And if we can somehow get that feedback, then we can use that as an input into a discussion that's gonna have 100 other variables and considerations.
Right, and I guess that's what I was getting at was the functions, because I think if I just look at these plans and I see a box and it says multi-purpose facility. I don't have a context in terms of what that means. Does that mean it's gonna be all rental? Does that mean? I mean, it's hard for me to get my head around as somebody who's close to it, and I'm just thinking for somebody who's far away from it. Unless some of the functions are described, I think it would be hard for me to say, well, I like that idea versus that idea.
And I
Yeah.
think you can certainly do that. And
Yeah.
frankly, on this plan, I couldn't tell really what was the house and what was the large four-season shelter.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be.
And then the images that what Evan's put on those boards, those are the things that we could share at this point. Because then you start to see these large gathering areas, small gathering areas.
And you're gonna have a large gathering area in the, if it's a new four-season shelter also, so it's.
And that, and going back to what Wes just said, if the house is favored and, but large gathering areas are favored, then we have to think about the house and how that can function with a large gathering area.
But it may be something different, and it may be that people may just wanna just toss out the small, shelter with a couple bathrooms just to start with, and then we're down to the two, and we can focus more on those.
Okay, well, that clears up, because I didn't want to get hung up on the footprints, that we had on the mural boards.
Okay, so you're ready to start your,
So,
and these, let me just say, these sheets are all with the updated other things that people wanted to add from last time, right?
and if we missed anything, let me know. I think we caught everything that we discussed. So this will be public information meeting number 2, so we'll be looking at the concepts. And tonight's meeting will be presentation of 3 concepts for the site at varying levels, and we'll give you some precedent images so you can understand what we're talking about on the plans, because we have been labeled and identified by use area or types of use in area. Before I get too far in this again, so we'll have an intro before we start this presentation from the steering committee.
Yeah, so we're thinking 5 minutes or so with Mary or myself, kind of providing a basis and an introduction. You guys would have about 15 minutes of kind of presenting the concepts. And then we'd go out to the common area or wherever the boards are up, have people mill around, and then have people come back together, and they can, if they want to vocalize whatever their thoughts are, or if they want to write more notes, they just have more of an informed instead of just having a presentation, trying to think of your comments. So we were trying to get it. I know that elongates people not being able to necessarily leave, but I feel like that's the best, in our discussion, that's the best way
And then
to,
if they want to stand and look at one concept for a while, they can.
yeah. And you guys would be out there with the board and stuff, so.
And we can do the whole thing in the commons, really, if we wanted to. I mean, just set up chairs and have a screen at the front.
Yeah. We didn't
I've
want-
been to programs like that too,
Just
which might be a little the people talking to people and things than us sitting on the stage and.
So again, the property is 10 acres, roughly 10 acres. Inside, as you can see here. For the next slide, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these. So we had our first public information meeting on October 18th of 2022. This is our second one, and then we'll have a third one for the overall master plan later this summer. There have been 2 online surveys conducted, one in last summer and then one in the fall, and we'll have the public survey before this presentation.
I think it would be, published after.
Okay, so then we'll have a third public survey based on these 3 concepts that will be in April, May. There's press releases, web content. The story map is, there's the address for the story map. And it's also within the city's park site project. There's a QR code for the story map as well.
What's the story map?
The story map is this story that you created for
Well, I'm,
oh, for the public.
yeah, like I wouldn't know what that is. So if you just said there's a story map.
So the story map is a running dialogue of the project from day one that is consistently being updated as we move through the project. And so all the content that started on day one is still there, and as we move forward into the concepts and the master plan will be added as well. So it's a place that you can come back to at any time. It's open 24 hours a day. That's
I think that's a good point. I think it's really worth encouraging people to go look at it, because it is, I mean, it's pretty cool. And there's some information there.
the project timeline, we're at where the blue arrow is, we're in phase 2 concepting portion of it. After this information meeting, we will open the survey up for public input of the 3 concepts, which moves us at the completion of the public survey, will move us into phase 3, the master plan. So we'll take all the information that we hear from the survey, not from the survey and the focus groups that we can start to develop a comprehensive plan based on what we're hearing. So themes from the engagement that we conducted to date, and they, again, these are focus groups and the public that we've heard, are history and culture is very important to this site, which means things like community education, year-round use, native farming demonstration or Ho-Chunk farming demonstration, gathering spaces, the importance of the Ho-Chunk connection to the site. Another theme is natural and peaceful. People like the setting that it has today, where it's very quiet park. It's not an active park. It's very passive, native landscaping, green spaces, and tremendous views of Lake Monona. Accessible to all. So making the space as much open to everyone of all abilities, so that you can enjoy the site throughout. And finally, connection to the water, because it is your big waterfront park in the community. It's a major draw to the site, and it's a major draw for another. So on the concepts, you'll see labels of different areas. So these photographs will give you an idea of what that landscape looks like and can look like. So woodlands are woodland areas that you have that could have some trails in them, but you want to maintain the understory somewhat and the canopy and clear out invasive. So you can see in these photographs, there's limited invasives showing up in the understory. Meadow area is typically not as tall grass as a prairie. It's a shorter grass, a lot of flowers throughout the year that change weekly and monthly. Then you'll see prairie on the diagrams, and that's taller grasses native to Wisconsin, taller perennial plants. They take a little bit more maintenance, but that is burn side. Wetlands and stormwater. There will be a need for stormwater collection on the site from hardscapes. And so those should be amenities in the park, and you can do a lot with native wetland plants to address that concern. We have labeled nodes on the concepts. Those are outdoor rooms or gathering spaces that can be created. They can be in the woods, they can be in the prairies and meadows. Anything from council rings to sitting areas to just places that you can transform in a day or something, and then take seating away. And it's just a place that has a holding place for gathering. These are smaller gathering nodes. So you can see in these photographs, it's under 20 people, 20, 30 people in these gathering nodes. So they're not big areas. The outdoor nodes, we've been talking with the schools in Monona, and this is an opportunity for them to bring students in their classes to use these outdoor node spaces. So it's about the size of a small outdoor classroom for education. You'll see one big circle on the concepts called natural play. Natural playgrounds are constructed of elements that look natural, logs and stumps and stones and different things. But they can be clay structures, that they're actually built to be a clay structure, but they're just made out of native materials or natural materials. But that can also include gardens and learning places for young people as well in those play areas. Water access, that can be anything from a fixed pier to a floating pier to a cantilever overlook. So these are different ways to have people have better access to the water. And then the trails throughout the open space, they can be paved to alternative trail surfaces. So what we're talking about with alternative trails are pea gravel or mulch trails or a binder course. And what a binder course is, that you see the one picture with the water pellets on it, it's really just crushed fine stones. It has a binding material to it that makes it harder. And then it keeps the dust down and keeps that material whole. It doesn't spread out all over the landscape. So there's different ways that you can create alternative pavements in the park that don't look like asphalt or concrete. They look more natural to the park. And they're more maintainable, that you don't have a rutted dirt path. So concept A, all three concepts that have this key feature listing here. So I'll just run through the listing, and then I'm not going to focus too much on those particular elements in the park, but we'll kind of walk our way through the park. So concept A is, we're calling it historic reuse of the site. And this concept, we're maintaining the house and keeping it in its location. Adding a pier dock with an overlook, a boater's beach. What I mean by a boater's beach is a place where people with kayaks and paddle boards and paddle boards can come to a beach area, not for power boats. Open lawn event space, about 1.75 acres, so you can have beer garden and those larger events. This one has a large parking lot on it, 50 parking stalls. Seven gathering nodes, those small outdoor spaces, classrooms. A natural play area. Naturalized areas within the 10 acres, and that's the woodland and meadows. Stormwater basement with a boardwalk. So this would be the stormwater needed for all the hardscape surfaces, being the parking lot and any concrete walk over the house. Maintaining and expanding farm areas for the Ho-Chunk use. So that's the fields where the corn was grown last year. A maintenance shed for any farming activity or any maintenance needed in the park. A transit stop on Monona Drive, so future buses routes that might come this way and have a place to stop at the site. And then pedestrian bicycle access. So concept A, we've maintained the driveway. That's the boardwalk going over the stormwater management area. But in this case, it would be a paved sidewalk, not a vehicular walk. So people could ride their bikes on it. It's wider than a typical city sidewalk. It's about 10 feet wide and 12 feet wide. Again, this one has the largest parking lot of 50 stalls, and see how big that footprint is on the site. It's in the place where the existing garage is located today for the house. The house, again, is existing on this one. There's a larger maintenance shed just south of the house for the general park maintenance. Then there's a smaller maintenance shed to the north where the farm field is. Expanded farm field with some fruit tree areas and fruit plant areas. That's like a shed. The paths, other than the main path that is the driveway today, the rest of the paths are that alternate pavement type. They're not concrete pavement or asphalt pavement. So you can see there's a network of paths Predominantly making a circle around the outer edges of the park. Through meadows and prairies and the woodlands, so you can see the different tones of the meadow prairie is the kind of the yellowish color, and then the woodlands are darker green, and the lawn areas that would be more maintainers is the light green. The nature play areas in the just north of the house, towards the lake side of the property. So it's kind of centralized, yet still close enough to restrooms at the house and the parking lot. The pier is located down the stone steps and wall, existing wall where there are some chairs right now in that little landing pad. That would be an area where a ramp system would go down to a pier. There's a walk that's been added on the other side on the lake side of the existing wall that is an accessible walk. So it bypasses the steps, the stone steps down to the ramp system to get you down to the pier. So again, we're trying to make the concepts as accessible as possible for everyone. The rest of the trails are all within 5% slope, so there's no need for any handrails or excessive sloping in the entire park. Concept B, we're calling minimalist. This one removes the house entirely and relies on a 4-season restroom shelter building, covered shelter. Something typically you see in the park. A small, and with an addition of another small open air shelter, but no restroom facility. It's like canopy structure. A pier dock system, again, another boater's beach. This one has an open lawn space, just a little bit smaller than the first concept. This concept maintains the one-way driveway as it exists today. There's a smaller parking lot on this concept. There's actually 2 small parking lots. Gathering seven gatherings nodes, outdoor classrooms. Nature-based play, the natural ice areas of the stormwater management, the expanded farm, and the transit stop and pedestrian access as all 3 concepts. So you can see in concept 2 or B, the existing driveway with 2 small parking lots. This to the north, the orange square, it's the small open air pavilion with no restroom near the farm fields and the boater beach. And that one has 6 parking stalls. And to the south, where the garages are today, would be the new shelter with restroom buildings. So that one has a little bit larger parking lot of 10 stalls. So again, not very much parking on this concept. There would be a concrete walk that would connect the 2 buildings or parking lots, which would be closer to Monona Drive. That's you see the white walk, and then the rest of the walks are that alternative material. And they crisscross through the site more. This concept and the first concept. The pier is a linear pier sticking out. We're trying to get to depths that boats can reach to the end of that pier and not very far. Concept C is a modern, what we're calling the modern park. Here again, the house is renewed, but this one has a new 4-season building with restroom and covered shelter. So 4-season building in this case would have a lot of the gathering room in it that could hold an undetermined amount of people at this point, but it's large enough to have events inside the building. The building would also have the potential to have some type of level of a kitchen or some type of service counter for these events. We're using part of the existing driveway. I think we can take that off because really we're not using the driveway. The new building could align with Monona Terrace, with Lake Monona in the Capitol. Because we found when we look back from the side in a broader view that the existing driveway, when you first enter into the site, actually aligns with the Capitol Dome. So this is a unique opportunity to have this new building have be a tie into that feature, be a look through building, but also have a view of the lake and the Capitol. A fishing pier, a boater's beach. This one is a fishing pier and not boating access on this. This is purely for fishing. Open lawn space of 2 acres, the largest open space for gathering of the 3. This one has a parking lot that's in the middle, size wise, 34 parking stalls. Again, 7 nodes. This one has a small amphitheater on it for outdoor performances. Nature-based play, the naturalized areas.
Could you say, how many people would you estimate the amphitheater would hold? I'm just curious.
You could probably get about 100 or so people in there. And we could do, we've got a space calculation on that, so we can get that, we can put a number on there. And again, expanding the farm, fruit trees and fruit growing area, a maintenance shed and the transit stop, and biking access. And when people come up to look at the plans in closer detail, you'll see all these things identified on the plan. So like the bike parking areas are identified on the plan. So they're generally around the buildings and parking lot and things. And then you can see how bikes could come into the sites as well. It's a little bit hard to see on the projection. But again, we're coming in at the existing entrance, driveway entrance into the site. But this one, the parking lot is linear against Monona Drive. And so it doesn't impede into the park. And then the building, you can see the line that lines up with the Capitol view going through the building. This is a great opportunity to have a glass box on that building so that you have these great views into the building and great views out of the building and great views through the building. You really don't see the lake and the Capitol until you get to about where the building's at, because the driveway comes up a hill. So we placed the building in an area near the tennis courts foundation, and it's on a higher point that you can see out. But it's tucked back away from the lake edge, so it's not impeding the edge of the block. It's back away, so you still have a large gathering lawn in front of it, so that people are outside on the lake and the buildings in the background. Again, the paved walk would be from the parking lots to the building, and then everything else is that alternative paving material. Circulating walks on this plan, because the parking lot's along Monona Drive, most of the trails are out towards the left side or the west side of the park. The fishing pier is oriented closer to a new building. And again, this is just purely for fishing or getting out onto the water. The amphitheater is adjacent to the building as well, to the north. We kind of tucked in the woods, so that it again has great views, and it during evening hours in the summertime, you're not getting blinded by sunsets and different things. It's and also in the hillside too, so it's got a natural rise to it. So there wouldn't have to be much grading done to get an amphitheater in, because it's a natural bowl. Again, this one has a medium-sized parking lot, 34 stalls. The nature play area is located between the parking lot and the building. So again, kids can arrive to the park either riding their bicycles or in cars or walking. You go to the nature play area, and then you need to go to the restroom, the building's nearby. And then the rest of the park and open space is the central part of this concept is open lawn, and then the perimeters are the landscape area. So you're kind of being surrounded in a sense on this concept. So those are the 3 concepts. And so this is where in those 3 we can add the buildings back, the photographs, so we can explain the buildings a little bit better.
I have a couple questions. One is, it seems to me in all three of these, we've identified the garden as exclusively Ho Chunk. And I'm not suggesting that it shouldn't be, I'm just posing the question. Since I know that the original survey interest in community gardening. And it seems to me that there's potential for people like Aldo Leopold, or, I mean, it's a potential, I think, for that garden to be a teaching garden or a community garden or a Ho Chunk or some combination of all of the above, and so I didn't know if we wanted to at this juncture, if we wanted to just identify it as a garden and fruit trees as opposed to specific, because everything else seems kind of general at this point.
I think that makes
That's a good
sense.
point, yeah.
And then my second question is as it relates to parking, and putting my plan commissioning hat on, you know, we usually figure out parking based on however big a building is. And I'm just kind of, I don't know, 51 stalls as opposed to 50 or 60 stalls, or it seems kind of random, as does 30 in this new plan, the 34 stalls. So I'm just wondering where you came up with those numbers. Did you just kind of pick them at random, or did you tie them to the size of the building that you think?
We looked at, we had comparisons there, right? Is it still in the presentation? Or was it in? It was at the board. At the board, so we looked at your existing facilities in Monona.
Okay,
And there's comparable size lots to the bigger ones. So like the Dream Park playground close to the 50 stall parking lot. And then I don't forget where this one was close to in size.
okay.
So we do have comparables, and we could add that back in PowerPoint.
I think at least narratively, it would be helpful to have that, like for you to say that, like just to give you an idea of this 50. I think to maybe your point too, maybe it wasn't your point. So 34 stalls would be about how many people attending an event?
You typically figure 3 people in a car
Okay,
when you're planning things like this, so it'd be about 100.
yeah, so I think that would be helpful. I don't know if that was where you were going to know, like, what is that?
And I don't know what Monona's ordinance is off the top of my head, but it's usually based on square footage of.
Right. It is, and our ordinance is tougher than anybody else's, so.
And does that apply for park buildings too? I'm just asking a question.
I actually can't say that it does apply for the parks. I don't think so, because our parks, a lot of them don't have any parking. Or have very
Yeah,
little.
so
So I don't think
it
it
may
applies
not
to
be a,
that. But as it relates to facilities, it's
well, that's what I mean though, too,
Yeah.
like a park shelter, do we have a certain number of parking spaces? I don't know, based on the size of the park shelter in a park? Jake, do you know?
No, it varies because the uses within the park
Yeah,
would dictate that as well, not just the size of the building.
yeah.
Also, the parking lots or spaces can be somewhat multifunctional also, you know, if food trucks are there, it's a place for them to park, and
Exactly.
you could put tents up
Right.
on the parking lot if it was something like that, so it's interesting to let people know this isn't just for cars to park on, that these can be multifunctional areas.
Good point.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually like the, I mean, I like the variance between the three in terms of the showing the parking, different locations of parking stuff. I just didn't know if. You know, why we weren't showing 30 on one and 40. I mean, I just didn't know if it was kind of a random choice or whether it tied specifically to what the buildings were or was.
Does anyone have anything else? Anything they'd like to add? Doug? And then Tony?
So I guess the question is whether we would need a city shed, maintenance shed. On all 3 of these or not, I don't know. If we only show it on concept A, but I don't know if we would need them in under B and C or not.
I would think we probably would. What do you think, Jake?
I mean, if you want to do stewardship days with volunteer groups on the property, you're going to need a place to store equipment.
so.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll put it out. Yeah. And then I guess, this question is a comment that it seemed to show the three different types of piers. Those aren't necessarily tied to any of the concepts, right? I mean, you could do, like, you could move this pier from B and put it on C or A, right? So I don't know. I think people maybe can figure that out on their own.
But, and we'll explain that before we start the present, before we dive into concept A, that all these parts are interchangeable.
Okay.
And like the mayor said, even the house is interchangeable in a sense. You know, if you like everything that's on concept A with the house, but you don't want the house, then you work a different building in. But if you like concept C, everything in concept C, but you like the house, we'll take the building off and work everything around it. From that concept.
That's correct. Just kind of a question on that, the public input session, these three renderings, excuse me, will be presented to them, and then they'll be asking questions based on that presentation, kind of to what you're alluding to right now.
But the idea was, we're gonna have boards of the concepts too, so people are gonna, after this, we were trying to keep this as short as possible, right? So we do this real quick hit 15-minute presentation, and then people could walk around and ask questions and look at the boards. And then it helps them too, because then they can actually read everything, because they can go up and see the notes. And then we can address any questions that they might have, and then they're gonna come back. And then that's what you're gonna have, an open forum then for people to.
yeah, like
comment.
questions and comments, kind of like we did last
Yeah.
time, but I think it'd be good if they had the opportunity to look at the board, see the presentation and look at the boards, because it's to really think about it.
And then there's like each have like about a 3-minute time period for them to kind of make their comments if I was reading that.
Yeah, I think like the last time. Oh, that's right, you weren't at, I'm sorry, you weren't on the committee then. Yeah, we had kind of like we do with public appearances at committee meetings.
Okay, I'm asking that because kind of what Doug was asking, and Dan, you didn't answer the question. These are kind of all like moving parts. It's almost like I could see almost just like a picture of the topography and the tree locations, and then like have little movable like cutout pictures that you can kind of move around, and maybe to some extent that might be helpful in that regard, is to create some sort of way to do that. And if we get it, if that is something that we would get into at that moment in time when people want to start moving pieces around. Because like Doug said, this pier may make sense here, or this pier makes more sense for all three, a fishing pier in a very shallow area of the lake, something that has something to say about that. So almost having that interchangeability of it all, and also, an aspect of like only one has an amphitheater when, all three could show an amphitheater to some extent. Would also, be helpful, I think.
And that the survey is going to be geared that way too, so that in the survey, we'll ultimately ask, what do you like about each one of these? Because that makes a comprehensive plan. I like the amphitheater. I like this node over here. I like this pier here.
I think just stressing in your comments early that we want feedback on what do and don't like about all the elements. And talk about what the next step is.
Yeah.
Is that we're gonna be taking all the feedback and not picking one of these three, but incorporating it into final. Just probably can't say that enough for people to.
And I think what we're thinking is release the survey like that night. So people, not everyone's gonna be able to be at the meeting, but they can see things online, or if they've been at the meeting, and we give them a couple weeks to, rather than trying to do a survey before. I just think it would be more useful if they've actually seen the plans up close and kind of big.
On the boards, are you are they just for viewing, or are you gonna do stickies, or?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the
We'll
stickies
we'll
too.
bring the stickies.
Yeah, so that's another way for people
To
to
leave comments.
who don't want us to talk.
The first meeting they did, we had stickies, people left comments.
Okay.
And I think having people go out and look at the boards after the presentation more people will look at the boards, because I would think
Yeah.
probably a lot of the people who were in the auditorium had, really thought to go out and wander around and look at the boards. So maybe
And
it's
I
encouraged.
think, first meeting, the comment period was before we went out in the hallway.
Right,
And so I like.
Right.
and a lot of people
Done
just
switch it
laugh.
the other way because it makes them come back and then they can look at the plans because there were people that came, that made comments. But then they came outside and they looked at the site and I think that their comments would have been a little bit different.
Mhm.
Because they were able to ask questions and look at things. We just had aerial photos then, but at least they could see it. And have their questions addressed before they spoke.
Yeah.
Does anybody have,
I had one other,
Doug, I'm sorry.
one other comment. So right now, on none of the three do the paved walks extend very close to the water. And I guess, my preference would be that at least some of them would be, that they would be paved walks rather than the crushed rock. And the reason I say that is I think, asphalt is much longer lasting and it's gonna stay in good condition for accessibility for everybody. Crushed rock is great when it starts, but it's, if you just go out and take a walk somewhere that's had a crushed rock path for a while and they require maintenance too, or they get uneven or things start growing in them. So.
So I think the material you were talking about is the newer material where it's not a loose crushed. Right?
The binder.
Yeah.
The binder,
And,
right?
yeah,
Because
that's
I
not-
think
I haven't seen that.
in other parts, like
Yeah.
in Michigan and stuff, they've used that. I
And
think
it could be a
it's simpler
variety.
as well.
It doesn't have to all be the binder course either.
Right.
It could be a variety of materials because the binder course is a little bit expensive, but it stays in place.
Okay.
Jesse?
Yeah, just, could you clarify on the nodes, the view arrows coming out?
Mhm.
Is the view area in between the arrows or how is that set up?
It's showing the direction that those outdoor spaces would kind of be focused on.
Got it. Okay. And then I was just thinking, is there a similar map for how the park currently sits for them to have like that comparison of where we're currently at when considering others? Is that a board that will be there for them as well?
And we have, is it in the pavement?
Not in the presentation.
We have a diagram for the pavement. So you can see
think
the
on
existing
page-
driveway.
Under
Yeah,
the page.
Yeah, so you can see the existing driveway versus what an added.
I was just wondering, Jake, are there other, your perspectives, other businesses like the storage building, like other things that are just fairly need to be done?
I think we should show one that has a little bit more focus on bike access, because in reality, if we want bikers to navigate through this park, get to park there, how the people use the lake loop is they want to go in, follow a route and then go out. And so like almost a main walk bike path, because that will get more people in versus if it's not convenient for bikers. And what we see in the city is bikers don't care what path is marked for them or not, they're gonna take it. So they will go down a 6-foot crush path with a bike, they will, and so we need to acknowledge, I think, that, and also probably the bike parking area substantially larger conceptually, because we would probably be looking at a bike rack the size that we have at the outdoor pool, which is for 100 bikes, because we really want to support kind of non-motor access in. That would be maybe the one thing that we would want to look at.
I wonder too, if we want to have more of the bike parking closer to the water, because we could have it down by the street, but nobody's gonna. I just think in Wild Haven, people take their bikes right up on the viewing platform.
Correct.
So it's just.
Well, these are near the facilities, which I think is probably. I mean, I think last time I mentioned like having the path as quickly as possible come off of Monona Drive and then have it come in for bikers. Which. I can see that.
So for concept. B would be a shared drive. coming right off. The main drag, being able to use that loop. That's how that's called out and shown really well. A would be the same thing, that 10-foot path would be kind of a multi-purpose trail. For access.
It seems like it starts halfway through the property. Like,
One problem is where the farm, where the field's at, I know it dries up high. So it drops down real fast. So we have to do, we could add a trail in there, but we'd have to grade it.
I had two quick comments where you mentioned event space on all of them. And you have like the garden kind of identified. And I don't know if it's just a lawn that you're calling the event space. Okay. I think maybe pointing that out, because I was looking when you were talking about event space, if there was like a designated space identified, but if it's the lawn, I think mentioning that the event spaces anywhere you see lawn. And then bathrooms for public use. I think it's worthwhile noting, because we talk about shelter restrooms. I think people assume they would be, you know, public use. But when you look at the other two concepts, C and A, when it has the buildings, there's no restrooms called out, so you'd have to say, you know, whatever facility or renovation of the house would include outdoor use, usable restrooms or things of that sort. But I think it's called out in one and not the other.
Even I see the way a building like that could be built, you could have exterior doors to the public.
Oh,
restrooms.
absolutely, yeah, I mean, I think you can do anything with either of the facilities, but not in the plan, but just mention that in your narrative that, you know, while you don't see a restroom.
And we could just add the symbols.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything else? Or Andy, were you finished?
Yeah, no, I liked it. Your presentation was about 19 minutes. And that was trying to take out the interjections of questions, which you won't get at the time.
Yeah.
Jake, I wanted to ask you in terms of a maintenance standpoint, you know, we're looking at a lot of big, you know, things here, but we were talking about 10 acres of space, that's green space that has to be maintained. With a design concept that's relatively idealized in terms of aesthetic, right? And a third to 25% of it is taken up by an idealized meadow or prairie. Is this something that would be able to be maintained by the staff, or is this something where, as I've seen in a new installation type setting, where we would want to focus on endowing a position to take care to make sure that this is established for the first 3 years at least? You know, is that something that's been talked about prior to that? Because I know this type, you know, this type of meadow and prairie planting, the way the savanna style, takes a lot of work to not only to maintain throughout the course of its existence, but especially the first few years when it's getting established. So it always behooves any project like this to make sure that you throw money at least the first 3 years to make sure that you get all of these things up and running, established, and then the ecology of itself can kind of take over.
Yeah, I mean, with any of this plan, our existing staffing level will not be able to maintain it. So, you know, that this is not new, we're all aware, I think, kind of in the overall park system, but especially with kind of specialized, you know, turf areas that aren't just mow and, you know, weed whack down, etc. We will have to look at, you know, a maintenance plan that's either contracted out or, you know, additional staff to take care of it. Same goes with the path system. You're talking about crushed rock. Those aren't maintainable in winter time, so you've got to look at what you want to have in, you know, winter use versus spring and summer use as well. But yeah, absolutely, the prairie meadows would definitely be time intensive to make them look like you see on the photos.
Yeah, I mean, it's to make them look, and you see all the work that is done at Woodland Park to make that
Yeah.
maintained, and that takes a lot of weeding, maintaining and burning, and then, you know, there's a reason why we mow. It's easy. Just mow it and it looks good and you can walk on top of it, you know. So I think as we look towards future and climate change, we want to kind of, you know, rewild our urban spacing, but that can come at a cost of aesthetics.
I don't know if this presentation is the right place to do it, but I mean, that's a challenge, right? If just building a shelter is this property then is essentially not revenue generating unless you corner off a piece of the park for of an event that rents it out. Whereas having either the current house or a new facility, has the potential to be revenue generating, which would then help with that. I mean, at some point, the public has to be aware of, this looks great, but implementation is gonna cost money. And the city doesn't have the money, so where's that gonna come? Not all donations. It has to be, so I don't know if that's something that you had to the slide of, here are some challenges with just the restroom shelter compared to the other ones or what, but.
And that's a
I don't
good
know.
point, because if you don't have a revenue generating building, then it's harder to maintain all of the wild space that you want to maintain.
Right. And I think the house itself may be more expensive to maintain than like a 4-6 shelter that's new and that has all the energy thing, I mean, we have to think about that
And
too.
there's a lot of.
But I think that there's a lot of opportunities with either the facilities ones, I mean, potentially for public-private partnerships. I mean, I'm going to Garver tonight for a show, and Madison doesn't have to maintain any of that. Because Baum's doing it, and they're the ones that are booking the rooms and the spaces and, doing all that. So, I don't think it necessarily, as Jake said, I think some of the, whether it's the maintenance outside or whatever the facility is inside, I don't think it's something that it's something that we definitely have to generate revenue for. It's not necessarily something that the city has to do. Okay, Park and Rec. Depending on what ends up in there.
Tenny Park, Terrence Wall paid for the new shelter at Tenny Park, because it's like a event shelter, it's 4 seasons,
Right,
but Terrence Wall paid for it.
Right.
So there is a good opportunity for a donor,
right,
or
Right.
even the house, or restoring the house into something.
Right.
Donor opportunities.
I just think my main point is the two facilities, the house and the new facility, have much more potential for revenue generating than
Like
that
a shelter.
And pointing that out, I think is what.
I think acknowledging the financial issues is probably appropriate at this point. Because if we don't. There are a lot of questions about, okay, this looks great, but how the heck, to me, that we're still focused on vision. And before we come to the council with a financially feasible plan, the business model needs to be part of that.
right.
And that, to me, is getting into how we support the vision and maybe the next phase of our work. Because we have to raise a lot of money, we've got to understand what the city's commitment is, we have to understand how we're gonna operate this thing. And put a plan together that people can get on board with, so. But I think at this
Yeah.
stage, we
That's where
can't-
that whole house discussion. I think it's good what you're doing, moving it to May, because Alexis has 3 different things you could do with the house. And one of those are mothballing it, part of it, and not using it, but that comes at a cost. They all come at a cost. So, to weed through that at another time is more appropriate, because that's a
It's a big discussion.
big discussion.
Caroline?
I was just gonna say, would that be appropriate for Mary and Andy to talk about as part of the introduction? Yes, we're going to be, but money, this will need to be self-serving, I think that would be coming better from you guys than maybe from the design.
Yeah,
It's a great idea.
As part of the introduction.
It's also gonna be a factor in what, and there might be all these great ideas that we get excited about, but what. We end up with maybe a little bit more limited because of what we think is feasible.
And the 3 concepts are based on what we've heard in the public survey. So the park shelter was limiting just about anything on the site, keeping it very minimal. But that comes at a cost. The park shelter is not going to generate much revenue, if any at all.
Right.
But it's a scenario where it's the least impact on the site. It's a small building. And it has the least parking.
I think if that's the intro, I mean, if that's part of the intro, I wouldn't make it the whole intro, but if it's part of the intro. I think it goes without saying, it needs to be positioned in a way that doesn't like freak people out or make people feel like, oh my God, we can never afford that. I don't want any of this, because I mean, we have to be inspiring people and exciting people about this plan at the same time that we're being honest about the fact that we're gonna have to raise the money for it. And that's always, that's always with any plan, with any capital thing, but. Anyone else? Rebecca, did you have anything to?
No.
Anybody else? Ella? No? So you have what you need to make a few, sounds like maybe a few further changes to the concept and then we'll be ready to go. Andy and I can work on some kind of an introductory, and I assume we would something about, as you're looking at these, keep in mind, the need to bring in generate some income to cover some of the costs and things, and then introduce you and Dan to do your presentation. And we could also tell people that after that, we'll be going out to the comments and whatever. Okay, so if that's everything everybody has about the concept plans, we'll move on to discussion of the public engagement meeting, which I guess we've talked about a little bit.
Well, not sure, Hannah probably be available, and maybe Emily, so we'll have a lot of people here and boards, so that if a lot of people show up, we have enough people to answer questions.
Will you have more than one copy of each of the boards?
Yeah.
And need to have some people, hopefully some of us can be there to, not that we're the experts, but to talk about the boards that we're stationed at. Like Tony, I'm sure can do a much better job than me about explaining what the pieces are, but yeah, I would think, hopefully most of us can be there. And by the way, this date has changed to the 19th of April. I don't know, did we notify people about that? Because the 18th, 19th.
Wednesday, the 19th. Yeah, my apologies. I had Wednesday, the 18th.
Because I know you talked about 18th before, and that's.
18th would have been our
That's
regularly
our council
scheduled.
reorganization
Correct.
meeting. Yeah, so
You sent out a meeting.
that's not gonna work, so, but the 19th, yeah.
6:30, 8:30.
People feel like, I kind of feel like if we have people sit down in the auditorium and then get back up again and then come back.
I think that's why
That's
we were
gonna be
talking
too
about
disruptive,
doing
that's
it
why I
at
think,
the
that's why I don't think they
commons.
need to be in the auditorium, I think we can do the whole thing out in the commons, and I think it's just much more. Yeah, I just, I think that sounds like a better.
Yeah.
Plan to me, I don't know if the acoustics. are
Nobody
like
likes
in the
sitting in the
commons.
front row in that auditorium, they all go.
Or on the stage.
Well, they can, yeah, because they can put a screen in front of the library there, at the far end, and line of chairs and then have
So we don't have to start.
poster boards. Don't look like we're all being.
Many events.
We stood there with,
Yeah.
lights even.
So do we need to talk more about the public engagement meeting? Anyone have any more thoughts, or Dan, did you have questions? We've got a rough plan here.
No, I like the way that you set it up. I think having them have people come back and give comments is a much better way to do it.
Do we want to give them more time though after your project presentation and like the public comment period? Because I think you're gonna basically have people kind of wandering around, talking and asking questions with members of your team, or maybe there's not a need for that evening to say now, if you want to go back in, have your 3 minutes of, you're gonna be giving feedback while you're walking.
Though, I would like to hear what people are saying instead of just one person here and one person there and stuff. I think as a steering committee, it'd be nice to kind of hear what everybody's saying instead of.
But that's a lot to digest, to hear 3 front plans in 15 minutes and then try to, respond, and maybe other people.
Well, no,
are
that's the point, though. After they hear the 3 plans in 15 minutes, they go out and have some time to look at the boards.
It's like 45 minutes.
But we have, in the proposal, we have 6:40 to 7:30.
Yeah, but we're changing.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
changing that. So there'll be the presentation, it'll be in the commons, not in the auditorium. People can then go look at the boards, and I don't know how much time we want to allow for that.
Yeah, that's what I was
So they
saying. How
get
much time do you want to have?
I don't know, 20 minutes, a half hour, what do you?
45, it's a 2 hour
I would
slot,
say at least
45
half
minutes.
hour. And then they
We
can come and ask questions.
And we can keep, we'll have enough staff there, we can keep people at the boards, if there's people who don't feel like they need to go back into a public comment period, they can stay and or leave, go home.
And also if it like gets quiet, we can go back to the public part of it and be done with it. Or-
And then we'll have the survey too, so they can take the survey online, or we can have print copies of the survey also.
The stickies will be valuable.
Right.
That's gonna be.
There's some comment boxes in the survey, so.
Right,
They
which
can
are, I've
make
always
general
found the
comments.
comments the most helpful part of surveys, a lot of times.
Yeah, I like the stickies.
I think it's gotta be at least a half hour, cause I'm just envisioning, like, I'm looking at this and I'm like. I've got a bunch of other people looking at it at the same time, and I've got stickies, I'm gonna get into side conversations with somebody next to me and go, don't you think this is, this video's cool or whatever, and then, and then. Have to write down what I like or don't like, or, And put it on a sticky, I think it's gonna need at least a half hour for all three, to get around all three.
I think we could say 45 minutes, 15 per concept.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're gonna say 45 minutes. It's not gonna stick to 45 minutes. It'll probably bleed over to an hour and then. Just say, 8 o'clock at the latest is when we're gonna convene back, and half an hour plus for comments. Right,
Minutes.
well,
Public comment period. 8 to 5. Well, that's what I'm saying. You're gonna run in, you're gonna end, here's what's gonna happen. Everyone's gonna be out, like Alderman Moore says, and they're gonna be talking amongst themselves, and then. There may be only the people that really want to comment are gonna be back in the
Maybe.
auditorium.
Well,
but we're not doing the
gonna do it.
auditorium.
yeah, But do you I would
Well,
I
I'm
would
thinking
say
about-
maybe you're gonna then maybe interrupt all the, it's gonna be hard to get people to quiet down when they have energy and momentum talking about these 3 plans. And no one's gonna feel like they've had enough time to put their stickies on and then now listen to 20 people speak for 3 minutes. That would be my recommendation, is if you wanted to have public comment, you can have some steering committee members in the auditorium and people can go back in, because I think you're gonna be.
Oh, we could do that too.
So another way of possibly doing it would be to have a bigger block at the beginning for people just to come in before they've heard the presentation. But they'll have the boards and look at the boards. Do the sticky notes, talk to each other first. And then have the presentation and public comment. I mean, I don't know, the public comment thing is a little bit awkward here, exactly where to fit it in.
I just feel like the Dans will be repeating themselves so many times, so like a presentation gives like a formal base.
True.
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
then
you want
they
those
go
stickies
out.
after they give the presentation.
Have a hard time reading plans.
right. And there's no reason why the boards will be out there when people come in.
Yeah.
And I think, we should also, I hope, have these designs up on the website before the meeting, so people can look at them if they want to. So they can look at them a lot of different ways, and really, we're trying to get input in a variety of ways here, both from the sticky notes, the conversations we have at the boards, the formal input. I mean, we're gonna be getting it in different ways. from
There's
different
2
people.
critical things that need to occur in the presentation, and one is to talk about the cost. And the other is, these are all interchangeable parts.
Mhm.
And if we don't say that from the get-go, then people won't go be all over the place.
Fair enough.
I mean, maybe there's a unique way where we can split up the committee amongst the boards, or have a table. I'm just brainstorming here. So that we don't cut the conversation short. So we do the presentation, then people go out and stickies or whatever, and then they can leave. So we don't have a formal comeback. But Lee's point, like, maybe there's 2 committee members stationed at every board so that we hear the comments that are being made. Maybe we have a table where if somebody really wants to feel one-on-one heard, they can come sit at the table and voice it to the committee members, that could be rotating or something of that sort. So maybe there's like a
That
unique
might not be
way
bad
that
if
we
you have
can.
committee members, because the public they'll want to talk to a committee member about their comments.
Yeah, and we should,
Maybe
I
that
think
would
we
be
have the boards, yeah.
The way to do it,
Maybe
to
there's
have
a
the
unique
table,
way.
the comment table.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a unique way to hear people out
Yes.
if they want to be heard, but not.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to what Manny said, which is I kind of like to hear what people, and I think it's important for all of us to hear what people say rather than having sort of sidebar. So I don't know, it seems to me after you float for 45 minutes, people get to use their stickies. Staying in the same room,
Yeah.
then we say it's time for public comments. I mean, if people aren't
It's a
interested in
very
commenting,
Similar format to it.
they'll go home.
We've done exhibit feedback and it works. It's as long as you are in the same place, you just
Yeah.
gotta
Just call it.
manage the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and if they don't wanna make a comment, or they don't wanna stay for the comments, they can go home after they did their stickies, but if they wanna hear comments,
Yeah,
they make them.
and we can have a list of what was on all the stickies after that.
Right.
In 45 minutes is a pretty good amount of time. We've done some recent public events where about an hour into it, people are like, okay, we're done.
Right.
You know?
So we're thinking roughly 6:45 to 7:30 for the stickies and then 7:30 to 8 for public comment. If we go 6 to 8.
Yeah, I mean. The presentation wise, I mean, if you guys are around 19 minutes, so that's 20 and then 5 minutes for Mary and I, so we're talking 25. I mean, if we're trying to be realistic.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
So 6 to 6:30, the intro, the presentation,
fine.
6:30 to 7:15, wander around in stickies, and then a half hour for comments and questions.
And I think
In
we
addition to
publicize
things that
this.
people have been telling us individually.
I think we publicize it until 8:30, like 6:30 to 8:30.
And then the boards will still be out if people want to go look at the boards again, afterwards,
Right.
they'll
So
be there
6:30 to
still.
8:30.
That's what your meeting invite says.
I don't know why. We can go 6 to 8. I'm just asking.
Well, are we
Like to go
gonna
6 to 8.
start the presentation at 6 or 6:30? Guess that's the,
I have the room booked starting at 6.
Okay.
So whatever you guys are more comfortable with.
although, people get home from work, have dinner, it might be easier to start at 6:30. We could be there at 6 because they'll be wandering in.
I'd rather start at 6.
You'd rather start at 6.
When we're done with the presentation too, you can take some boards and keep them down here. And then I'll
True.
play or something.
That's true.
Is
What
this gonna
time
be
did we start?
recorded or live broadcasted, any parts of it?
The Dan presentation could be recorded. I mean,
I don't know, live broadcasting in the comment. I'll check with
yeah,
Will and see if he can do a live stream from the comments or if it would just be,
that's a good question. You could from the auditorium.
sure.
We'd definitely like it recorded so that people
Yeah.
before doing the survey could watch your presentation.
What
Or
time
even
did-
have a chance to view that part before, viewing some of the plans online and have that context, like that video presentation be available.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
can't
if you
record
haven't
there, we
seen
could do a separate recording
Yeah.
if possible. Yeah, similar message.
Did we start at 6 or 6:30 last time for the first one?
I don't recall. I think it was 6:30, but
I think maybe even like adding that presentation to the storyboard would be good as well.
Yeah. So do people think we should start at 6 or 6:30?
That means we're getting there
I
at
will-
5:30.
You won't be here, yeah.
I like 6:30, but
Andy, did you say 6?
I like 6:30, but I'll go with what.
I just think 6:30 might be a little doable for a lot of people.
Because they do, people do go home and they come.
Yeah.
And we ran
They
into
gotta
that,
grab something to eat if they work till 5, it's.
we ran into that on that. We started this meeting last winter, I think it was about 6, and we had to do it twice because we had the second wave come in.
Well, let's go for 6:30. We'll do the intro and concept 6:30. 6:30, we'll do the boards from 7. What to 7:45. And then the input questions from 7:45 to 8:15.
We stayed around till 9, right?
Yeah, it seems like it was. In terms of the survey, does anybody, first of all, have anything else to say about the meeting? Then, have you guys started a draft? Questions?
Everybody's got it.
We don't have that.
Yes.
Was that in?
It's a link in the MSA agenda.
See if I can see that.
Apologize, I pick up the children. Same thing.
Their agenda was right after ours.
That's the three.
No, my apologies. I took that agenda out because I felt like it was confusing with the actual agenda, so.
So I think our goal here for this item of the survey is to, one, know that we're gonna have another meeting, either hopefully April 5th or 6th to finalize the survey. But if there was any general broad concepts that you wanted them to make sure that they tackle in the survey, to let them know, and then we can review the questions in between now and April 5th. And send Jake the feedback of questions that are either missing, edits of questions, et cetera, to Jake, and then you guys will refine it, and then we'll review it before April 5th or 6th, or whenever we can meet, and then we meet, ask any final questions, and then lock that in. So
have them send out the link.
So they would send out the
Right
link, yeah.
away.
We could probably do that via Zoom too, couldn't we?
Yeah, that would be just,
We'll
We
do it
tried
via
to keep
Zoom
it-
rather than in person.
yeah.
We tried to keep it as short as we could. There's a lot of
If you're
material.
not here.
Yeah, I mean, I think my one thing, as I was mentioning before, is just, I think we had some guidance from our previous survey as to facility programming and functionality. And just starting to zero in on. I mean, I don't know if it has to be this specific, but like, do you see a facility, hosting weddings or whatever, and just trying to get those questions. Because I think then we're back into what type of facility you need, how big is it gonna be?
Yes.
Does the 6th work for people? I know the 5th does not work for Rebecca. It doesn't really work for me either. That would be Thursday. For a Zoom meeting
Oh, for a Zoom meeting.
to talk
just
about the
about
survey, yeah.
Yeah. You have a time,
Well, let's plan on the 6th.
you have a time.
6:30.
Dan, does it matter to anybody? I can't imagine it's gonna take that long. Do you
No.
wanna just start at 5 like we start these meetings, or would you rather do later?
Whatever time works best. I'm open.
Would 5 work for you, Rebecca? On the 6th, would 5 o'clock for a Zoom meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody else, yeah,
Let's
let's plan on the 6th then at 5, and hopefully we're only talking an hour, and we'll do it via Zoom, so. But in the meantime, you'll send the draft.
And we could work on it in the call. We could pull up the survey and work on it as you're telling.
Yeah. But if people have suggestions early beforehand,
Mhm.
that's fine too.
Again, my hope is that we pass whatever survey on the 6th.
There's a fundraising, San Damiano fundraising event meeting at 4:30.
Yeah.
I don't know. if that-
I couldn't.
There's a 4:30 meeting on the 6th for the San Damiano fundraising event.
Oh,
It's a standing meeting, first Thursday of every month.
how many of you are involved in that?
Nancy.
Might just be me.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we can move that up or move that if need be. If this is the only date that works for this survey.
Or you can send your questions and.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm happy.
So do we want to go through these, anything about the reports? I'm just looking at the next item, number 7 on the agenda here, MSA reports and questions from committee. Project schedule updates, story map, decision matrix. Is there anything you need to cover on that?
I don't think so.
And what is the focus group open house?
So that's coming back to the groups with the concepts, getting feedback.
Oh,
from
okay.
the Groups.
I guess that's something we haven't, that was something we wanted to propose as an opportunity, rather than have 4 or 5.
It'd just be
calls,
one.
At one event at the house, invite all the focus groups to come down. And some had specific interest in visiting the house as we talked and then be able to. And everybody kind of hear the councils to. Mary's point is, it's good at that point to, as you started talking about specific comments and questions and concerns on it, to have a broader group than.
And I assume that would be after the public meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, because Jake, do you want to talk a little bit about the story about the house right now?
Sure. The boiler had catastrophic failure this weekend, so it is completely shot. So we are without heat at the moment. We drained down as much as we could, and spring temperatures. Hopefully, we did not have any further issues with the pipe. The replacement cost is extremely expensive. It's about $20,000.
Yeah, and I'm not about to spend.
Boilers, so that will be a decision the city will have to make longer term. The other things we have with the house is that because it's on a well, that has to be inspected and tested. That'll be done hopefully within the next 3 weeks with a determination if we need to like abandon the well immediately or if we can get an extension of a permit to operate. So yeah, not a great weekend with, the news of that and having issues with the heat, but we are hopefully at the end of the cool season. So, we're going to be limiting the access at public access, to the house until this master plan process is done. But we, certainly I think we gave the opportunity for people a lot last summer to be able to tour the house if they had opinions, and there's a virtual tour on the website that's available.
There's also issues with the safety, general safety features that we aren't following that we should be. Yeah, so
So
a variety of reasons.
we could certainly get freezes for another, 5 weeks. Is that
We can get what?
freezing temperatures?
Right,
Pipe.
right.
Yeah, I mean, the water is drained from the pipe, so it really isn't any different than where it was when the winter that we bought it. When we didn't have it heated.
But it's not usable.
No. I mean, it's not heated right now, it's
Right,
not heated and we don't have the water on at all.
And we had already had some concerns about safety issues and things. Just with so many people in and out.
Yeah.
Lack of control over who's in there and. So report of activities, Parks and Rec and the Friends.
As far as park operations are concerned, this is a little bit in between time, so if we can get in and do some, some of the forestry work, we did have the trees all removed, so we stump grinding the majority of those on the property, so you may see little hills of dirt. But
Do you still have more to take down?
no, all the trees we had taken down, they're down, so the larger trees are down. Now it's just kind of a stump grinding and restoration, turf restoration. We've got a couple cleanup days scheduled. We'll be looking for volunteers. Parks Pride is Earth Day in April, say the 23rd, 22nd or 23rd. We have a group from Clean Lakes coming out. So I'm assuming we will still continue to have the volunteer groups that will help with shoreline, brush activities, etc. So otherwise it would just have a regular operations. And then we do have some of the events scheduled on the grounds for this summer.
And we'll update the tree survey to get
Okay,
rid of the trees that are gone. Because ultimately, we can give that to Jay, because it's in GIS. So if he has a way, if you
Yeah,
use it.
I think we have it now. I think we have the layers, so.
Because Dan and Hannah not only tagged the trees, but they photographed them too, so all that data is in the system.
okay. That's
So it'll
good.
be helpful for going forward,
Mhm.
the part and keeping records.
So did you keep the tags of the ones that you cut down? So that you can let them know if we cut down.
We took pictures.
Oh, okay.
And Andy, did you have anything to?
I don't think I
Friends
really do
activities?
have anything. I mean, I shared about the fundraising event in September that we're planning for that Nancy mentioned. But.
Want to talk about the muskie thing a little bit? Was that since our last meeting?
That didn't happen.
But you had didn't you have a meat raffle at the Muskie Lounge then and make a bunch of money on that?
Sure, yeah, we. If you want me to talk about that, we did, so we were gonna do an ice fishing, so Musca Lounge reached out to us about partnering to do a fundraiser. We were gonna do this whole ice fishing thing, they lined up a lot of it, and unfortunately, it was just a heat wave at the beginning of March, and there was just a lot of concerns about the ice and safety and having pretty much a mud party at that point on San Damiano's property, so they then did a meat raffle, and I think they raised about $2,600.
Yeah.
And New Belgium and some others kind of chipped in some money too. It's a nice partnership that we're trying to build with them, but also kind of that whole business strip, because I think there's gonna be a lot of parking there for events across the street, so. So yeah, that happened. I don't know if that happened since last time, but that did happen. And certainly, you know, we're working with Jake about the beer gardens and different variety of events that we'd like to have posted on that site, so.
We did approve his event list last night.
Oh, nice.
Councils.
Thank goodness. But yeah, we're always looking for, as probably Parks and Rec there, we're always looking for more business connections and partnerships and stuff, especially with sponsoring the beer gardens and other events and kind of the community engagement stuff, so.
Cool. Dan, did you have anything else? Or Jake?
I had one quick thing, just because when we talked about it, maybe something, I think we've talked about it at this committee, but the name. If there's consensus that we would absolutely be changing the name of the park, that might be something to bring up in the public,
Yeah.
comment
would
issue,
think
because
we would be, yeah.
it's one that comes up, at least a question to me quite a bit. Are you keeping the name? And I said, I don't think so, that would be, but it might not be bad to bring up in your initial presentation. That as an interim, we are referring to it as the San Damiano property, but it's the intent as a result of a master plan. We would be looking for a name change.
Yeah.
Or officially dedicated. The name.
Figure out how we're gonna do that. Okay, so we've got a meeting on the 6th at 5 o'clock, which will be Zoom to finalize the survey, and then the public engagement meeting will be April 19th, beginning at 6:30. And then in May, which would be what, the third Tuesday in May for a regular meeting, we will be discussing more in depth about the buildings. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.